So I just saw the Monster Hunter movie, and Jesus Christ, knowing how beloved the Monster Hunter franchise is, we'd better start putting its fans on suicide watch. It's that bad. Alright, so I'll break down the story as best as I can, so spoilers, I guess, if you really care. Pro tip, you shouldn't. In the Monster Hunter film, there exists two worlds, our world and the New World, which is the world where there's monsters and stuff. Mila Jovovich plays United States Army Captain Natalie Artemis. In the real world, Artemis and her army squad are in the desert, searching for another team that mysteriously went missing. A storm sets in, which pulls them into a portal into the New World. They end up again in a desert, where Artemis' squad is killed by a monster called a Diablos, and soon after Nerskillas. Eventually she runs into a hunter who, despite being a main character, is never actually given a name throughout the movie, who ended up stranded in the desert after being attacked on a ship. The film focuses on the developing relationship between the two, and they manage to build a friendship despite a language barrier. As Artemis manages to communicate with the hunter, she learns that a portal leading back home is controlled by a sky tower, and the duo both journey over to it. They make it to an oasis where they meet up with another group of hunters who help Artemis reach the sky tower, which is guarded by a Ratholos. After the battle, Artemis decides to remain in the Monster Hunter realm, but it is noted that there is a threat that as long as the portal is open, monsters may begin to seep into the real world. Artemis and the hunter are tasked with closing the portal, and then the movie just kind of ends. Alright, now that I've given a brief plot synopsis, courtesy of Wikipedia, because honest to god I hardly knew what was even happening, let's talk about what I did and didn't like about the movie. First up, positives. The CGI was decent, I guess. The monsters are true to the game. I don't know. Now, what didn't I like about the movie? Well, first off, what in the blue hell were they thinking with the story? What, a portal in the real world opens up to a different one? At best, that's a generic, oh, character gets sucked into the video game world plotline, and at worst, it completely betrays the source material, a complete bastardization of the Monster Hunter lore. As far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing in the Monster Hunter universe regarding portals opening up between our world and theirs. This movie should have begun in the Monster Hunter world, and it should have stayed in the Monster Hunter world until the very end. And I guess that sort of brings me to Artemis as a main character, or really just character in general. Why does she exist? She's an uninteresting character with no connection to the Monster Hunter universe. The movie actively wastes screen time by trying to explain her origin, time which could have been better spent focusing on the deuteragonist, Tony Jaa's character, the aforementioned unnamed hunter. Showcase his journey, show us how he survives and thrives in a world like his. Supposedly, the reason for Artemis's conception is because, quote, I wanted to recapture the feeling of when I first played the video game. I came to the game not knowing anything about it, and as a stranger I was immersed in this world containing these amazing landscapes and these amazing creatures that would kick my ass, and I thought, I want that. That should be in the film-going experience as well. Okay, sure, on paper, that might be a good idea, but you know what? That idea should have stayed on that piece of paper, because as a result of your stupid artistic projection, your movie suffered. And this is something I complained about with the Sonic movie. You made a movie with a generic storyline and you just slapped Monster Hunter onto it. The movie being set in the Monster Hunter universe adds very little, and if you stripped it of its source material, I'd argue the movie would remain mostly the same. Moving on, good god, it was boring as all hell. With Paul Anderson movies, you can usually expect a movie to at least have a bunch of decent action scenes, but there were like 3 in the entire movie. Rarely did any actual monster hunting actually take place, which is weird because when you think Monster Hunter, you think of complete badasses ripping giant monsters to shreds, but the vast majority of the movie details how Artemis struggles to survive in a bland desert environment. It's only in the last like 30 minutes of the movie where more interesting and vibrant environments were explored somewhat, but by then it's too little too late. I'm complaining about the lack of action scenes, but honestly, the action scenes are probably the worst thing about the movie. As is the case with many Paul Anderson movies, action scenes are irritating and annoying, with obnoxious dubstep cutting in and out, and the camera flashing black so fast it could give you a seizure. I suspect this was done to distract from how mediocre the action scenes are. They aren't bad, but they aren't impressive or even entertaining. Even when the characters fought the larger monsters, I was just like, huh. As far as special effects go, I mean, they were okay. The monsters fit in well and seemed to remain loyal to the source material. However, during the later part of the movie, I noticed that the effects kind of looked off. It looked as if they set up a scene on a table, green screened the actors, and edited them in. Now, if this was an indie film or a YouTube video, that would be kind of cool, but for a Hollywood blockbuster, it's absolutely laughable. The ending of the movie was legitimately one of the most insulting endings I've ever bore witness to in any movie. At the end of the movie, Artemis and her new monster hunting crew, I guess, fight a Rathalos to ultimately try to close the portal or whatever, and right when the fight starts, the film rolls its credits. Now, maybe I wouldn't be so upset with the blatant sequel baiting, but I'd like to stress that the majority of the film is boringly uneventful, so when the movie was cut short, right as it seemed that something interesting was finally about to happen, I felt cheated. The pacing of the movie was terrible. Again, the majority of the movie was spent showcasing how much the main character struggled to stay alive as she was thrust in the new world, but oh, all of a sudden, in the last 30 minutes, she's a badass fighting these giant freaking monsters. Go to hell. Overall, a Monster Hunter movie could have very well worked. It would have taken some creative thinking and some workarounds, but it could have worked out nevertheless. Unfortunately for this movie, it was made by Paul Anderson. Honestly, the only achievement this movie has to its name is subverting expectations, because with a Paul Anderson movie, the bar is set so low that for this movie to crawl under it is mind-blowing. Not only did Paul Anderson do a poor job of making the movie, but it's clear that he was trying to advertise this movie to the general population when Monster Hunter is a game with appeal that only goes so far. A Sonic movie could work, after all, a lot of people know who Sonic is, but Monster Hunter? I despair. If a Monster Hunter movie was to be made, it should have appealed to Monster Hunter fans and Monster Hunter fans only. Monster Hunter is a film which completely betrays and bastardizes its source material. Its entire premise, what with the portals and all, is a complete spit in the face to the Monster Hunter franchise. Not only that, but the movie is incredibly boring, with the majority of the movie taking place in a bland desert, and action scenes not only being few and far in between, but mediocre at best and obnoxious at worst. The special effects range from being passable to laughable, the pacing perplexed me, and the ending insulted me. There is little good, if any, I have to say about this movie. I give the Monster Hunter film a 1 out of 10. Laughably, the movie did absolutely abysmally at the box office, so we may never see a sequel to this joke of a movie. Good riddance. Friendly Fella Jed, out.